The Talk Station presents Faith Matters, a look at contemporary stories and issues from a faith perspective. While this is a pre-recorded show, we are interested in your ideas, comments, and questions, and we urge you to email them to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
And now on the Talk Station, Faith Matters.
And welcome to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball here with Reverend Robert Cornegay from Chapel by the Sea in Emerald Isle, Reverend Mark Woods from Cherry Point United Methodist Church, and Bishop Doc Loomis from All Saints Anglican Church. And hello, gentlemen. Good day, everyone.
Good day.
Good day.
We got a variety of issues today for our Faith Matters program, and let's start with the Pope and his exhortation, which is delivered this past week, and beginning with a look at it from the New York Times perspective, and Julie Byrne, who writes, "The Pope's Amoris Laetitia brings the Church back to old traditions. In practical terms, the Pope's new letter on marriage and family does nothing to help the Roman Church thrive and grow, nor does it threaten any breach. For one thing, before Amoris Laetitia, divorced and remarried Roman Catholics already had options within their faith. They could stay in the church and observe norms and about not receiving communion, or they could find a priest who would give them communion anyway. So Pope Francis' encouragement to priests to have conversations and find solutions within divorce among the faithful won't change much. The priests who are open to it are already doing it. At the same time, priests reluctant to reconsider norms in communion are by no means forced to have these conversations now. Amoris Laetitia leaves more room for local decision-making and Christian conscience when it comes to these matters, but that includes the consciences of local conservative priests." Let's go back to kind of the beginning of this. Doc, help us out a little bit with the origins. I understand that this comes from actually a synod on the family, and it had been that was where some of these origins were. I was reading in the his opening chapter here. So is this an important document? Is this important for understanding in the Church Universal, or particularly for Catholics? Where do you see it?
Well, it's an unimportant document in that, as the author notes, it really doesn't do anything. It's not like it's laying out a treasure map to the kingdom. On the other hand, it's not saying anything that's going to cause any real great schism among the faithful. People that are conservative and liberal have different views on this, but it's really not a big dividing document. So in that regard, it's kind of unimportant. What is important about it is that the Pope is once again putting forward language that demonstrates the kind of reconstruction or the kind of reformation he'd like to see in Catholicism, but at the same time holding to the status quo. It's what the authors of several articles we looked at call kind of a stealth reform. Mm-hmm. So in that, it's really important. And I'm sure Mark will have something to add about the success of stealth reform.
Well, he threw it over to you there, Mark, real quickly. Is it? But is this does he maintain an orthodox position for the Roman Catholic Church, or is this create a crack in that veneer?
Yes, he maintains the orthodox position because he's the Pope. So therefore, that is the orthodox position. Yeah. No, I don't know. As a Methodist too, I mean, doctrine, and I'm going to sound somewhat like a heretic here, but I always think of doctrine and these conversations that we have over orthodoxy as organic, if you will. Mm-hmm. That because we talk about it, and because we have conversations, it grows, it moves. We use new language. I mean, for the first 400 years, we fought about language. We're still fighting about language. I don't know what I'm talking about. We're still fighting about how best to interpret things. Mm-hmm. How best to interpret Scripture or tradition. And I think this is an attempt by Francis to kind of. I hate the word stealth reform, though. It just. I don't know why it rubs me the wrong way for some reason.
Too Star Wars for you?
Yeah, something maybe.
It's kind of like leading from behind.
Yeah, what is that, right? I don't know. I just think that he is continuing a very ancient conversation. So in that way, no, he's not moving anywhere. I mean, it's an ancient conversation that's been going on, and yet you have people reporting on it and talking, continuing to talk about this, which makes it sort of grow, which makes it sort of move. I mean, just the fact that I'm a Methodist sitting here talking about that suggests some form of organic growth in the sense of linguistic in the doctrine. So I don't know if that helps explain anything.
Okay, well,
but
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, well, to a degree, and she points it out in the article pretty clearly. Says that the most practical effect is the advancement of Francis's continued public relations makeover of the Roman Church, and I think that's he is controlling the discussion
To be what? The church of
the church of the people.
the church of mercy.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
He's emphasizing
this is our trend.
conscience.
Right? Conscience and mercy.
And declericalizing, I like that word, authority, and most important, substituting the language of mercy and welcome, for which so many inside and outside of the church have perceived as legalism and exclusion.
One of the articles here, though, said that this is actually language that you have to skip a couple of popes. So you go back to Pope Paul, I guess it was, and you come to Pope John Paul and Benedict, and they did not emphasize the conscience so much, but you have to go back a few, and they did. So in that sense, it is ancient language.
But it is it is interesting that he knows how to work the media, probably better than any. Of course, I don't know that much about popes, but anyway, he knows.
John Paul II
was pretty good too. That's what popped in my mind.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, they're getting savvy, and they know how to dominate the headlines, and so he knows that by coming out with these words, lots of words, no real change in position.
Well, yeah. So let's talk about what's actually happening in this, in this document. What he's saying is the position of the church is and has always been that people who are divorced and remarried will not receive communion. The practice
without an annulment.
Without an annulment. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
The practice in the church has been, however, that you either went to church and didn't receive communion if you were in that category, or you found a priest that would give it to you anyway.
Correct.
In other words, you exercised your local option to work with a priest who is exercising what has always been known as his local option. All the Pope is doing is kind of codifying that and saying there's a benefit in the sacrament. The sacrament is not a reward you get at the end of the day. It's something that actually ministers to the soul of those who are penitent. That was his idea in this language here. And he's saying, so if the local priest wants to do it in certain circumstances, I think that's okay. Well, yeah, it's a big deal that he says it's okay, but the reality is that has been happening
Correct.
all along. So that's why he's not establishing a precedent for change,
Right.
but acknowledging the reality. And this is why the conservatives get all bunched up about it, is because usually when you start giving people the local option and decentralizing authority, things start going downhill.
It undermines.
That has happened historically. It certainly happened in my little Anglican group.
Well, he mentions, or is mentioned in the article that's from another source. It's from the churchmilitant.com that talks about how he had said that too many people are coming to the church and wanting to have communion once or twice a year, which we would in the Protestant world often call Creasters,
Yes.
when it comes Christmas and Easter, and as if it's some sort of reward. And what he wants to do is disavow that notion. That would be something that would be allowed. Now he says in this, I was reading a little bit about the family. And he says that because you mentioned Mark, you mentioned about language changing. He talks here, says we also need, this is from the Pope's exhortation, says we also need to be humble and realistic, acknowledging that at times the way we present our Christian beliefs and treat other people has helped to contribute to today's problematic situation. We need a healthy dose of self-criticism. Then, too, we often present marriage in such a way that its unitive meaning, its call to grow in love, and its ideal of mutual assistance are overshadowed by an almost exclusive insistence on the duty of procreation. Nor have we always provided solid guidance to young married couples understanding their timetables, their way of thinking, and their concrete concerns. At times, we've also proposed a far too abstract and almost artificial theological ideal of marriage, far removed from the concrete situations and practical possibilities of real families. He says this after speaking about how many people are giving up on marriage. Many people just living together instead, and that the idea of family has been changing. So is this language, Mark, that is appropriate for him to speak of, and for us to be also maybe taking marriage and be exhortating about marriage ourselves?
Yeah, one of the quote you just read, one of the things that strikes me about that quote is he used the language of realist, concrete, and practice. I mean, these are very that's very on the ground language, right? You don't get that kind of language. At least I never read that kind of language from John Paul II or from Benedict. None of that kind of language where they would talk realistic, concrete, on the ground kind of stuff. And you get that in Francis. And when you read his apostolic letter or any of the other things that he's written, that's very different language, and that's more practical language. And my Methodist ears should love that on some level. But
right.
I guess we could talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, now coming up here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. I'm Ben Ball, along with Reverend Robert Cornegy, Reverend Mark Woods, and Bishop Dr. Loomis, and we'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. I hate to interrupt the conversation in the room. Right? We're just off on another subject here. But let's talk a little bit about where we left in the last segment, talking about the Pope's exhortation here about the joy of love, and talking about the family here, and about his desire for us to look at marriage and what we say about marriage, because a lot of what the discussion has been whether or not the Catholic Church is going to allow, or does this local option, as we call it, which sounds kind of like a real estate deal, is the local option going to become something that is part of the magisterium? That becomes really the argument here and if that's true, well, is birth control next? Is celibacy next? Where does the Reformation go? And on that subject about the stealth reformer, it was written in an opinion piece in This Week magazine. It's from, I'm trying to think where this is from. Damon Linker writes it. He says, if there are any doubts that Pope Francis is a stealth reformer of the Roman Catholic Church, the apostolic exhortation he released last week, The Joy of Love, should settle the matter. A straightforward reformer of the Church seeks to change its doctrines. A stealth reformer like Francis, on the other hand, keeps doctrines intact, but invokes such concepts as mercy, conscience, and pastoral discernment to show priests that it's perfectly acceptable to circumvent and disregard those doctrines on specific cases. And then he goes on to say basically that a doctrine that is not particularly enforced is one that just simply goes away, or doesn't even need to be changed, just isn't followed. Is this Mark? You're saying that the pragmatism of this Pope may be troubling?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about doctrine as kind of this knowledge that you ascend to, right? And we've heard this language. If it's you ascend to this kind of knowledge, and in Catholicism, it's I mean, on some level, it's been like that for, doctrine is received. You don't come up with doctrine. You don't, you receive that doctrine and well, this is what I have to obey on some level. And there is a certain freedom in that. And that article points out that when he talks about first going to Catholicism, there was a freedom in sort of the secular nihilist culture that Catholicism provided, with its emphasis upon obedience, upon commandment, upon assenting to certain knowledge and certain doctrines. And so, I mean, the article makes makes a very interesting and maybe a good point here that, if we, okay, so in the sense that you would then start from the kind of doctrine and then move into practice. Well, we have the kind of the exact opposite happening with Francis. He is saying concrete practice, realist. You're getting a sort
Practice the tail wagging the dog.
Right. You get a kind of, instead of a top down sort of theology, you're getting a grassroots. Okay, now what does that have to do? He's emphasizing experience a little bit more than possibly.
Is this Aristotelian rather than Platonic?
It might be. I mean, it might be. I would love that.
The
on some level,
particulars rather than the.
That's right. Instead of ascending to something, right?
The universals
There's some idea.
versus.
Rather,
how do you
it's caught
balance
up
those
in
two?
the particular.
Yeah,
it's caught up in the particular. Yeah, that's an interesting point, Rob.
Doc, your eyes
Yeah,
are
I'm
blazing over
just
here.
sitting here hoping somebody's going to tell a joke now, because people are at home. It's like 8:20 in the morning, and they're listening. They're listening to Robert and Mark going, "What on earth are they talking about?"
Aristotelian. Okay, but on the Pope's language, though, let's look at that a little bit more. It says, "We have been called to form consciences, not to replace them." Interesting thing. I don't know. What does that mean to anybody?
To me, I don't know. In reading this, and of course, from my perspective, it appears his audience that he's trying to reach, and I may be all wrong on this. He's trying to reach those lapsed Catholics, those Catholics that are outside of they can't come and have communion, and so they've made the decision they're just not going to come if they don't get communion. I mean, he kind of says that. And then so he's saying, look, there's more to this than just communion, and if you'll come on back and get involved in the church and all that's going on, then we'll see about the communion thing. Well, but the most important thing is getting reconnected to the church. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. That's one of his audience. Now he's kind of letting the other clerics and priests and everybody know we got to make room for these people.
Yeah.
We got to give them some space to be able to come back.
He uses the language integrated into the life of the church, and that's what you're saying.
That's exactly
don't just come for communion and Easter and Christmas, but come out for the for the fundraiser, to take part in the education process.
The covered dish dinner.
Come to bingo. I don't know what else, but let's. But what does that mean to integrate into the life of the church? I mean, we have many times. I would imagine we all have this, where we see folks in the pew on Sunday, and that's the only hour we see them. So what does that mean, and what can we learn about maybe how we need to exhort to integrate into the life of the church?
I tell you, it's fascinating. We have some people that come, and I've seen it in other places as well, not just us, but communion is not the big deal. Of the church. In fact, they may even miss communion Sunday. We don't do it every Sunday. We do it quarterly. And so we have the opposite problem, often in Protestantism, is that we don't understand that whole thing about the Eucharist and the communion and what that means. So
there were a lot of arguments over what the nature of it is.
Exactly. So I think what he's trying, it's almost like it's overemphasized for those that can't have it, and so he's saying, look, come on back, and we'll work through this together. We're going to listen to you. We're gonna hear what you're saying. The on the ground thing, and
but also with the effort of being more instructive of
correct.
It also, that's what I got out of it. But he also because this comes into a different kind of language, the geopolitical language of the church. He commends the Southern Church. Really, he says in some countries, especially in various parts of Africa, secularism has not weakened certain traditional values, and marriages forge a strong bond between two wider families, which clearly defined structures for dealing with problems and conflicts. pretty interesting nod to me to the Southern Church against the Western and European Church, where culture has devalued marriage and devalued those bonds.
Yeah, but to be fair, that's a little like saying the bubonic plague has not yet come to England, as the rats are boarding the boats in France to cross the Channel. I mean, that's sadly, and God do something about this seriously, but that's just a matter of them being a little bit behind on this whole thing. This is the argument that everybody has right now it's the slippery slope thing we talk about all the time. When you go to a local option and you begin saying it's okay to debate, it's okay to talk about this, the church needs to change as the morals and situations change around it. And you're always going to have two groups of people. One that absolutely agrees the church has got to change, it's got to keep with the times, it's got to stay in conversation. And another group that views the church more the way I do, which is this is kind of a rock in a tempest-tossed world. This is kind of a place where there are doctrines and there are things that are kind of solid, and I'd like to hold on to them. And those two are not going to be brought together. And what the Pope has tried to do in this is to make a statement that won't significantly upset either side, while making it the being the Pope of mercy.
So where do we go again with those that outside of Catholicism to take language of marriage and family and also of the Eucharist? As you said, Robert, is not emphasized a great deal from your perspective. I mean, it's like you said, quarterly.
It's a routine.
We have a weekly
many.
service, but I have a half a dozen regulars that come to that, and then we do it in our regular church service once a month. And Mark, how about you?
What's so I would agree with Doc. Doc made a good point. His last comment there. There has to be things in our world that we sort of ascend to, and meaning I don't always want to have the answers and then find something that agrees with me, right? I want to be told, Mark, that's not correct, right? And I feel like the Catholic Church has been able to do that, and I think we'll still do that. But I do see Doc's point that if we choose a kind of local option, if that becomes what we get out of this exhortation, that's going to be problematic, I think, on some level, because the local option makes pastors like me or priests or anybody in their local context, they become the interpreter of doctrine.
Correct.
They become the sole kind of interpreter. And if it's going to be up to me and I've said that before.
You said before, yeah.
If it's going to be up to me just to tell you exactly what marriage is and how we're going to interpret, Christ's presence in the Eucharist or something like, we're in some trouble. All right, we're in some trouble.
The loss of the sacraments in the watering down of the Protestant Church has really, I think, been a crisis at the root of all of this.
I think so, too.
The sacramental, the sacred understanding of marriage, the sacred understanding of the feast, the sacred understanding of baptism, and the baptismal ecclesiology that follows from that's lost in most of the non-denom and in some of the major denominations. And losing that means I don't put an emphasis on the sacred nature of marriage. It's not until death do us part, it's until love departs. And that has profaned the very sacraments. And I think if you want to know what to do, I'd say begin to look again and teach the sacraments in the church, which is what the Pope is saying. Yeah. Come and be integrated and see the sacraments.
It's a remarkable looking at the communion as when we go to the table, we're not doing it different times. We're going to the same communion,
right?
That the apostles and the others went to, and that communion ends at the wedding feast of the Lamb.
More to come in a moment on Faith Matters. Welcome back to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240, and thanks for joining us here today. As we take a look at an article that comes from the BBC, the Christian militia fighting ISIS, or IS, whatever they want to call it today. And the article is from Owen Bennett-Jones from BBC News Iraq. He says there's a striking picture on the wall. He describes an untarmacked road scorched by sunlight leading to a small village with a mountain range behind it, and all along the side of the road there are crosses every 100 meters, taller than even the lampposts. Christian village, a guard mumbles, near Mosul. We are in Baghdad headquarters of the Iraq Christian Resistance Babylon Brigade. They are militia, although they prefer the phrase Popular Mobilization Unit. Whatever the language, about 30 of these outfits have sprung up the past couple of years, and between them have 100,000 armed volunteers. They were formed to block the advance of the so-called Islamic State group when they swept through North and West Iraq in 2014 and threatening Baghdad. Not something that we've heard a lot about. I don't think in the United States we've heard a lot about these Christian militias. We've heard about militias going, and they are now, the interesting political side of this is that they also are applying for funds from the Iraqi central government to kind of take the place, basically, of what the Iraqi army, which is basically gone. So this article, though, I think has its most interesting part for us in this discussion of its biblical context of why to fight. But Doc, let me start with you first of all. What was your impression reading about this group? And did you've been following some of these things? You know about these Christian militia groups before? Or?
Well, what we all know is what ISIS has been doing to Christians. Mm-hmm. If we don't know it, we've missed pretty obvious news headlines recently. And what this group is a group of people that decided that enough was enough, and that there were Muslims that were springing up in these small militias, taking the place, as you noted, of the main army. And these Christians decided to come alongside and particularly protect the homes and the lives of Christian people. And I say, God bless them.
And they say that most of these brigades that or militia groups that spring up, though, are Shia Muslim, a handful of Sunni Muslim, and then this Babylon Brigade is the one Christian one.
Well, it's what we call ecumenical warfare at its best. It's nice to see them joining together against a common foe.
Mark, you enjoy the bait there, right? Take the bait of this one.
Wow. I mean,
ecumenical warfare.
Yeah. The enemy of my enemy, right? That statement. I don't know. Anything that is Christian militia just seems like an oxymoron to me. I've espoused that position several times, on this program, and it's just. And the most interesting part about the article was when they can't find the verse of where Christ says, sell your cloak and own a sword, and the lieutenant or whatever his name was, Kildani, glances over to one of his assistants who is playing a game on his phone, and he just says, "Find it." Yes. And I know that the literal kind of interpretation here is that he was just trying to find a verse, but when it comes to our ability to justify our own actions, when it comes to Scripture on some level, you can find it. Mm-hmm. You can find it. And so I took that phrase to be metaphorical as well on how we react as Christians. You can find that verse where Christ says that, but you can find a million others where Christ says the exact opposite, right? Not to do that.
And yet the people that walked the closest to him were wearing swords even on the night that he was taken in the garden.
I know, and it's
that great Rice and Burroughs line.
I know.
Put away your sword.
And
don't you know that it's all over?
That's right. And they use the sword, and Jesus says, those who live by the sword die by the sword, and he heals the man that he cut, that Peter cut. This should.
Oddly, in this article, the interchange that I thought again was interesting, and you also get the perspective of the author here too, who's trying to get this out from this group about their biblical foundation here. He says, "What about the commandment, thou shalt not kill?" I ask. He says, "You are a Christian?" Kildani asks, somewhat doubtfully. "Church of England," I offer. And Kildani nods as if that explains it.
We get that a lot. We get a lot of nodders.
He's a Protestant, someone says with a note of disapproval.
He's a Protestant.
Sectarianism runs deep in Iraq, I think of, but of course I don't say that. Kildani turns to me again. We have to fight. We have to defend ourselves. And Jesus himself told us that if you don't have a sword, you should go out and buy one. Robert, silent so far on this segment. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I fall, and I'm going to go back to the pragmatic position with the Pope. I'm with the Pope on this one. That we have to. No, probably not. Well, no, he did say, they need to be stopped. ISIS needs to be stopped. It's that whole thing of protecting the innocent, as far as I'm concerned. That's what it boils down to, and that the last option we have is to intervene physically to stop the persecution or the murder. Some have even used the term genocide of Christians in that area, and others as well. And so ISIS seems to have cornered the market on this. So as a group that's rising up within Iraq to stand against this, to me, this falls as much in the protection, defending part of it, of the command for the police. Mm-hmm. What is their vision? Defend, right. Protect. And so to me, that's what's going on. It's not a imperial conquering army. They're doing defense. This is defensive. Now, they may have to go on the offense to protect themselves to do that, but it's not to take territory, to do all this other stuff. It's it's to protect themselves. So I'm gonna fall on that one. I'm gonna go with that side of it, that they're doing a work that has to, in this case, needs to be done.
I think we probably have all read, though, especially online and other sources, though, calls for Christians in a crusade-like manner to take up arms against ISIS.
Well, there are many that are doing it. They're going over and fighting with the Kurds, with the Peshmerga, I think it's called. Peshmerga, excuse me. And, they're standing in the trenches side by side with them and fighting. So,
a friend of mine from Washington just left.
Yeah. So it's happening. Yeah.
And in Mark, I mean, again, we see these calls go out as if it is a heavenly call to go and make this case. What do you think?
Ben, I'm not sure I'm going to win this one today. But that's just, the way I read the gospel, that it's very difficult for me to kind of support any kind of crusade in that way. And the crusades didn't really work out very well for us last time, I imagine. But, it's very hard for me to look at the Christ that I preach and serve and kind of condone that kind of thing. It's very difficult. It seems ironic to me to go into battle carrying the very the cross or the very execution device that was used to kill Christ, and he was raised and says, now you don't have to fear death, and yet it seems precisely what we're doing.
And have done over history. Really. Constantine to the call in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, both sides.
And that's the irony of this. ISIS is claiming God on their side. And they're claiming God. This isn't some kind of not claiming God. They're claiming God. They claim that this is their God and this is the right thing. And then you have the other side that's saying, well, we're claiming God as well. Right. That just seems like both sides are doing the same thing. I don't know.
It's tough.
I'm not going to win this one with Robert and Doc here. So,
and Doc, are you?
Don't bring me back into this thing. After that little soliloquy, I'm going to feel horrible about carrying the instrument of Christ's crucifixion into battle. Oh my goodness sakes alive! I'm sorry. I've got to come down on it the same way. I can read the gospel all day long, but in the end, you walk into my house, you walk into my country, and I'm probably going to try and stop you.
And I would say that's okay. It's just that's a sin. That's all I would say.
Yeah, and you're good. I love the way you describe that. That it's not the preferred choice, and that it's a choice that has to be dealt with if it happens.
And on some level, I'd probably do it as well. But I would say that I'd sinned. There would be a point where confession would have to be in any kind of killing for me. I don't care where it is. There has to be coupled with that a kind of confession.
Robert, I'll go back to, again, founding fathers there. We used to say that. I mean, call of for prayer and repentance.
Yeah, that's right.
Before going into battle.
Before going into battle, that's right. And, and again, this is, it can get a little complicated because, the state at writ large was established by God for a purpose as well, just like the church writ large was established for a purpose. And they were given different weapons of warfare. And so that when we serve in, and we are a part, we're not of this world, we're in this world. And so we have a responsibility as citizens of the church and citizens of the state to be obedient. And there are times when the state has been given the sword, the literal sword, to protect the innocent and to punish the wicked. And that is, as I understand it, that's in obedience to God's command to do that. So we have that through the state process. Now the church, if the church was, Chapel by the Sea, or if we were to take up arms and go hit someone else, with a military assault, that's another thing altogether. But in a function of the state of protecting the state, I think you can draw a little line in there.
More to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Welcome back here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And thanks for joining us here as we come to our final segment for this morning. And we go to actually a local story. Saw this story just a day or so ago from change.org. And it's a man named Dennis Burgard out of Jacksonville, North Carolina, our Jacksonville, that put up a petition. Change.org is a website where if you want to promote an idea, start a petition for something, you go to change.org. You can do anything. You can put any kind of petition up you want. It doesn't necessarily go anywhere other than it may be, if it gets a certain number of supporters, to be sent off to parties involved. But this one is interesting because with the controversy around HB2 in North Carolina getting the national attention it has received, one of the linchpins of that national attention has been the decision by Bruce Springsteen to cancel a concert in North Carolina. So here is the petition. It's headlined, "Petitioning the People, Support Bruce Springsteen in His Right to Refuse Service Based on His Deeply Held Beliefs." I thought it was ingenious, frankly, to frame it in that way. He says, Bruce Springsteen has a right to his deeply held beliefs. He has a right to control his business and refuse to do business with those he disagrees with. He exercised that right when he refused to serve ticket holders in Greensboro, North Carolina for a concert that he agreed to perform on April 10th, 2016. He canceled the concert just days before he was to perform and did so specifically because he disagreed with the beliefs of the people of North Carolina. He has that right, and so should every business person. He did so even though he knew it could cause financial harm to those who had non-refundable hotel reservations and non-refundable airline tickets. He did so even though he knew he was causing financial harm to people who had no control over a decision he disagreed with. Rock on, Bruce. You exercised your rights as a business person, and we support your right. Sign this petition and support the right of Bruce Springsteen and all Americans in their right to control their own business. Again, I think this is clever because he couches this in the idea of which, frankly, the debate has not really gone to this way, about deeply held beliefs. So, Robert, what do you think? Is the guy on the right track here?
I agree. I think it's brilliant. I think the snark in it is it's so well written that it doesn't. You could really overplay this, and most of the people in in their responses to this petition did. But I really like the way he worded it, because when you're going through it, you're thinking, "Oh man, am I really supporting?" I happen to disagree with what he's doing, but But now I'm signing a petition that agrees with what he's doing. I've never thought of it this way, and my brain's about to explode. And so a lot of people, it's interesting. He's over 1,000 signatures.
Yeah, which is up from 500 from yesterday.
Yeah,
so.
which is pretty interesting. It's all over social media.
Yeah,
it's all over social media. So it's going to jump pretty big. But I think it's that paradox that we just love to see someone think through that thing.
Mark, we like a conundrum, don't we?
Oh yeah, this is wonderful. Whoever put this up obviously had Springsteen tickets. It was a little aggravated about it. He had some money invested. Yeah, he or she knew what was happening.
Yeah.
But no, I think this is really. It just shows you kind of the ridiculous nature of it on some level.
The debate, even.
Of the debate, even to. And how oftentimes, and I say this, in fact, I haven't said it in a while, but it kind of reveals the dialectic, right? That the other thing has its opposite included in it. So the very movement that Bruce Springsteen did to boycott North Carolina had in it the very thing that he was trying to boycott, which is just, I think, Ben, you said this was brilliant. I think that as an argument in itself, that demonstrates its brilliance. Yeah.
Oh, former debate coach would just love this.
Just love it. Absolutely love it.
Love this.
Well, this is the law of non-contradiction, isn't it? Personified in his action. He just completely, contradicted himself in his action. Yeah, so it's
Doc, you want to weigh in here?
No.
You and I are probably the only ones who ever listen to
You're a
Springsteen.
fan.
I do not like Springsteen in the least. Seriously, do not. I think his name is made up. I don't even know what his real name is. It's probably Jones. And where's E Street anyway? I don't even know what that is. And why do they have a band? Why doesn't F Street have a band? So the question from this, of course, this is ironic. It's beautiful. And Oscar Wilde said it best. Irony is wasted on the stupid. We have become a stupid nation. We see something like this and all our stupid little liberal minds go, yeah, Bruce, yeah. And then we see some baker get charged $100,000 for not making cupcakes, and we go, yeah. When the two things are diametrically opposed to each other, it's ridiculous. The irony is wasted. It's just, oh my goodness. When are we ever going to stop being stupid?
This double
Robert.
Standard. Yeah. We're
But
not.
it's so blatant.
You can't cure stupid.
But it does. It is. He has done an outstanding job and of offering a new dimension to debate that we thought was pretty clear cut. Was Springsteen. He's just meddling. He shouldn't be. But then again, he has these deeply held beliefs.
Right.
And then isn't that exactly what we have said should be governing here? Or at least have a role at the table of discussion.
Well,
it's deeply held
There
beliefs.
should be an accommodation made for deeply held beliefs.
Yeah.
That's what we talk about all the
It shows
time.
that double standard that exists, that as long as it agrees with what we're agreeing with, let's go for it. But if it disagrees, no, we've got to punish them somehow. So it's brilliant. It's just really good, and I hope this thing takes off. I'm sure by us talking about it in the last segment of our show, this is going to elevate it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But have you ever been so proud to be from North Carolina? Do you know how many people are not going to come here anymore?
Yeah.
This is like my dream world down here. I don't have anybody coming from New York. I don't have these rock and roll band crazies. No liberals are going to come here. This is wonderful.
There's already a petition out for Planned Parenthood to withdraw from North Carolina over this. So, there's some real benefits to this. We could see this this making some real changes.
We talked about pragmatism in the first segment. Here, the governor of Rhode Island had maybe said the best thing. Said, I'm not going to limit flights. I'm going to go down there and try and steal the business.
There you go.
So, this argument over the bathroom bill has then extended into so many other kinds of phases of life here now that some of the things we forget that we talk about language. You go back to the original Charlotte Ordinance, and there's language in there that's disturbing that calls for, in other words, a recognition of gender expression, which is undefined, which is they use things in a legal document that have no definition, and that's troubling. And then also it leaves out. It also says in their Charlotte ordinance, it eliminates the discrimination that they said was inherently private about restrooms, changing rooms, etc. But also they also scratch out discrimination for YMCA, YWCA, and dormitory style living. Cannot discriminate on the basis of all those things, including now gender identity and gender expression. So what does that mean for a women's shelter? What does that mean for people who are in danger? Who are in dormitory style living? If that were to hold up in Charlotte, those things are not getting examined. But so here's a guy who very cleverly brings in the argument that we as Christians and other people of faith, Jewish and Muslims, also say of deeply held religious beliefs ought to have a role in the conversation.
Correct.
There are deeply held beliefs should have it. And in Springsteen's case, it may be secular beliefs, but deeply held beliefs should be, which we would also might find oxymoronic, secular beliefs. So that should have a role, should have a point in the conversation.
Yeah, well, just what keeps echoing in my mind is the scripture that this pointed difference between people doing what is right in their own minds and doing what is right it morally from God's law or God's revelation. And so, there was a obvious problem with people just doing what they think. Mm-hmm. That was the problem in the first place, wasn't it?
Well, this is Springsteen's
discerning
whole
what's
thing.
right and wrong without God in the formula. And as soon as you take God out of the formula of determining what's right and what's wrong, it's Katie barred the door. It's wide open. That's an old one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. You sound like Daniel Boone when you said that. But this is what
So
Springsteen.
I have no idea what Robert just said, by the way. So.
Katie bar the door?
No idea.
Never mind. He had to live in a log cabin to get that. So he's been on this bandwagon since the beginning of his music. Mm-hmm. He thinks he knows what's best for America.
Right.
Born in the USA.
Right.
And he's going to do whatever he can do to bring that about for his children and his grandchildren. That's very nearly a quote from his mouth. Mm. And sadly, a lot of us would say America already kind of knew what was good for America. Mm-hmm. We had something. We had a constitution. And that's the music that ends the show. I know that music. I'd recognize it anywhere.
And you get the last word.
Well, thank you.
And the word of the day is...
Stop buying Bruce Springsteen albums.
All right, I think we interrupted a thought there. But so that's going to stop us here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station.
Thank you for joining us for Faith Matters. Email your comments, questions, and suggestions to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. Give me faith.
Faith Matters is a production of the Talk Station.